The Brandon Peters Show may contain explicit language and detailed plot points. For more information on the show, stay tuned to the end of the episode. And now, here's Brandon.
Welcome to the Brandon Peters Show, in the beginning of a series we're calling
The Summer of 82 at 40.
a weekend by weekend look at the movies released during the summer of that year. And joining me for this journey, I'm very happy to have from Forbes, Scott Mendelson.
Hello. Lovely to be here once again.
Yes, and if you like Scott, I hope you like Scott, because he's going to be around for the next so many weeks as we journey through weekend by weekend the summer of 1982. So we're going to open up this one talking about this project. So this is an idea I had because I turned 40 this year, and also 1982 was a pretty big summer at the movies. A lot of seminal titles came out that year, and they're also all turning 40. And I thought it'd be a cool idea to kind of take a trip through weekend by weekend, seeing what's coming out at the movies, kind of what's going on in news and pop culture through that weekend, and just taking a week by week glance, see how the box office worked back then, and how the movie going public behaved, what they thought, and what are the movies they were watching, because you may know some of the staples that came out that summer, like E.T. This is the summer of E.T. But there are some, like all three this week, that you probably forgot, never heard of, didn't know existed. And guess what? They're kind of hard to find, but we're going to do our best to power through them. Scott, in 82, were you turning 1 or 2 years old then?
I was born April 2nd, 1980.
80. So yes.
So I turned 2 just before the quote unquote summer of 1982 began.
Yes. Which, to be fair, summer then, it wasn't summer now. So where we're starting here, because our summer is going to go along with what is the current box office summer. The big ones kind of held a little later than normal, though I think it kind of, you could say there's an official starter in our next episode. But so Scott, around 82, where was the summer season probably beginning for a studio?
Contrary to what I've always believed, there usually was a big or potentially big picture, basically the weekend before Memorial Day, which isn't that much earlier than what started now, with the exception of, the periodically when, Fast Five or Avengers Infinity War opens in, late April. Generally speaking, the summer season as we know it used to start the weekend before Memorial Day weekend. So you had Maverick, and then over Memorial Day weekend you had the Flintstones, and that was Hot Shots Part 2 and Sliver, and then Memorial Day weekend Super Mario Brothers and Cliffhanger. That was summer '93, and it's and there are some years where it went even earlier than that. You had the first weekend in May of 1995, you had French Kiss, which was sold as the summer starter. And then the next weekend you had Crimson Tide. The next weekend you had Die Hard with a Vengeance. And then you had Memorial Day weekend with Casper, Braveheart, and Mad Love, a romantic melodrama with Chris O'Donnell and Drew Barrymore, both of whom would star in Batman Forever a month later. Generally speaking, the summer of 1996 is when we first started seeing officially the summer starting in the first full weekend of May. That was with Warner Brothers releasing Twister to a near record $41 million over its first 3 days. That was in the top 5 of all time at the time. And that was 2 weekends before Mission Impossible opened over Memorial Day weekend in 1996. Since then, generally speaking, you've had a big movie or the summer starter, opening basically 2 weekends before Memorial Day weekend. The big, Spider-Man in 2002, Iron Man in 2008, Gladiator in 2000, and et cetera, et cetera. Or obvious example, apologies, The Mummy in 1999, opening 2 weeks before, actually 3 weeks before Memorial Day, because in that case, the big mega movie was Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, which opened the weekend before Memorial Day weekend. And not to get ahead of myself, but that started sort of a trend, in my opinion, positioning the weekend before Memorial Day weekend as the best slot on the calendar, period. Because that's where you had all 3 Star Wars prequels, The Matrix Reloaded, all 4 Shrek films, John Wick 3, Deadpool 2, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what would generally happen is you'd have a big opening weekend, and then what otherwise would be a larger second weekend drop would be mitigated by the Memorial Day holiday, especially for family films.
Gotcha. Yeah. And a bonus day. Yeah.
Yeah.
That weekend.
So, looking at the calendar, not to spoil next week's episode, the 14th is Conan, the 21st is Road Warrior, and then the 28th Memorial Day weekend is Rocky 3.
Gotcha. So yeah, and as you can see, powerhouse movies that people still talk about and worship to this day.
None of which opening on the first weekend of May.
No, where we're at. So a little disclaimer here. When you're listening to us right now, it's May. We're recording in January. We have no idea what the film landscape's going to look like in this. And if you're listening in the way future, we're still in the pandemic, and things change. And so we probably are. Well, we're not going to be referencing what's going on right now. We have no idea when we're doing this. We're focused on 1982. You yourself probably are aware of what's going on. We at this time are not. We don't even know what the world is going to be like. And then, but so that's where we're going to be at. And
I can't believe Robert Pattinson died at the end of the Batman.
Yeah. Wow. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt stepping in, being like, "This was my job anyway."
As Cobra Commander. That was the real twist.
Lots of memes with that line in there. This is my job anyway. There was the Jay Leno and Conan meme that said, "This is my job anyway." That was, oh man, I'm making old jokes.
That was the best pop culture meme since So Dark the Con of Man.
It was, yes. Man.
15 years ago. Wait, 16 years ago.
16 years ago. So, and those of you who listen to my show, and we have, episodes that will focus on a movie, and it's like an hour-long show talking about a movie. These are not going to be those type of reviews. These are going to be a little bit swifter reviews with Scott and I giving sort of just off the cuff talks about these movies. And there is a chance that many of these may get covered on a later episode of the show. So those are some things that are here. We're kind of going over the weekend in general, the landscape, all that stuff. And I'm kind of excited to dig in. But let's first take a look at what was going on in the world this week. The May 7th to 9th weekend of the box office.
It's the news of the moment.
But during that week, Ronald Reagan began 5-minute weekly radio broadcasts. I don't remember them. I wasn't listening to the radio. I was just months old. The NHL Stanley Cup, or not the Stanley Cup, the playoffs were going on, and the conference finals. In the Prince of Wales conference final, New York Islanders beat the Quebec Nordiques 4-0, and the NHL Clarence Campbell conference final, the Vancouver Canucks beat the Chicago Blackhawks 4-1. I'm putting it in there in case guest of the show Stephen Shapansky's listening. I got your hockey for you.
That's a lot more hockey than I was expecting in this podcast.
Right. Other sports news: Seattle Mariner Gaylord Perry becomes the 15th pitcher to win 300 games. IBM released PC DOS version 1.1. Here we go. U.S. performs nuclear test at Nevada test site. Awesome. And in theater news, Arthur Kopit's musical 9 premiered in New York City. So that's what was going on in the United States or Canada during during this time.
It's 27 years or 26 years later would inspire a terrible, terrible Rob Marshall movie.
Right. That's true. The 9 with thespian Daniel Day-Lewis. All right. So let's head on to our first movie.
It's bigger than the Indy 500. Grander than the Grand Prix. Get ready. Get set. Go! For the most outrageous road race of them all.
Who are you? I'm the real Burt Reynolds. You know what I'm talking about?
Safari 3000. Longer, faster, and as dangerous as Africa can make it. Can two impossible people handle racing's most incredible challenge?
I'm your navigator, not your wife.
3 days of treacherous terrain.
Coming through!
And unforeseen obstacles.
Any idea where we are?
Well, I can see us Ferg and the Milf.
And the mist. All this fog and mist.
It's 93 of the world's craziest competitors.
Oh my God.
Safari 3000. It's the thrill of victory and the agony of making the wrong turn.
No more, Mr. Nice Guy.
David Carradine and Stockard Channing in Safari 3000, the race that drove Africa wild. It's a jungle out there.
And I'm going to say, Scott, we talk about this. You and I have talked about this for a long time. It's in your writings a lot. I would call this weekend of the 3 movies we're going to talk about a prime example of all 3 of them rip off, don't remake.
Yes, I would agree.
This is what we have a prime example of. We're going to go with the first movie. It's going to be Safari 3000, which has an indeterminate release date in this month, but this lightens the load on another week and makes this one a little bit fuller of a week for an episode. And also send in your corrections. If you know dates where things might have gone better, let us know. I'm doing my best research here to find out an accurate schedule. It's not easy. I thought it would be easy. It's not easy to find out where these were. I'm trying to juggle between limited release, wide release, and sometimes they list when it just had a premiere or screened at a festival. I'm trying my best to keep it wide release, but there are some limited ones. We'll figure it out.
All you Paradise 3000 fans, you hold our feet to the fire.
Right. Safari 3000, Scott.
Sorry, shit.
You
I missed
just
the 2
shamed
titles.
This
God
one's
damn it.
This was direct. So this movie came out some point in May of 1982. It's directed by Harry Hurwitz, starring Stockard Channing, David Carradine, and Christopher Lee. It's our first of 2 Let's Add a Monkey to It movies this month or this weekend. That was a thing that happened a lot back in the day. Like, yeah, throw a monkey in there. It's boring. Something like that. Scott, first reaction to Safari 3000.
It was interesting seeing Christopher Lee in a more overtly comic performance.
Mm-hmm.
He is kind of sort of the villain, but not really. I mean, it's not that kind of movie.
Yeah.
It struck me in the first act as a lot like the first Crocodile Dundee.
Okay.
You have this big city career woman who's a journalist who sort of ends up.
She writes for Playboy.
Yes, exactly. Which is, I only read for the articles, so that works.
Right.
Sort of being embedded with a somewhat rugged man of whatever.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, it's Carradine's, drag racer or whatever. But by virtue of the film being about a big race, it does kind of play in the Smokey and the Bandit type territory.
I was Cannonball Run. Yeah, I felt like they were going for a Cannonball Run here. That's yeah.
It's fine in the sense that it's something that I'll be honest, I had never heard of it until.
Same here.
It's available in segments on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
I did not check to see if it was able to rent anywhere, but I'm sure it is.
No, I couldn't find it.
Okay, then
Yeah,
I don't feel bad recommending the YouTube version. And yeah, it's It's a relic of a bygone era,
Mhm.
as I imagine a lot of films we're going to be discussing are. You know,
Right.
it's just a movie. It has a quirky high concept. It has well-known actors that weren't necessarily butts in seat stars,
Mhm.
but were marquee draws back when people went to the movies just to go to the movies.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's
And-
yeah, it like I would say now we're like, oh, it's a Christopher Lee movie, but back then it was probably Stockard Channing and
Yes.
Carradine drawing him in.
Yeah, she is the dominant focal point on the poster.
Yeah.
And this is 4 years after Grease.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I personally, this is probably my favorite movie of the month. A weekend. I'm not too crazy on all of them, but Christopher Lee was definitely a high point of this movie because he's camping it up to a high degree that only he could pull off. He's got a mustache, like this costume, a helmet. They call him the Count. And he's just deliciously eating every line up, even if he doesn't want to be in this movie or not. Carradine's passable. Stockard Channing is always enjoyable. She's got just charisma off the charts, so she can pull a thing. One thing, there's a decent stunt or two, but the racing's kind of like par for times like this. So there's nothing stand out about the race. I think it's there to be like, ooh, look at all these exotic animals in Africa, because that's where they go to do this race of sorts with cars. And there's just comedic hijinks, things like that. Yes, Smokey and the Bandit type vibe, Cannonball Run. These people like watching people driving cars back then, just hitting the road, traveling around. That was a thing. This is probably more of a 70s relic than something that would be big in the 80s, but it's something it probably hit a lot of drive-in double bills. Probably would.
Yeah, I mean, it's a B picture.
Yeah, definitely a B picture. But you know what? It was okay enough compared. I watched it third of the movies, so it kind of felt like a reward from what we got else coming through as well. But Safari 3000, yeah, not gonna highly recommend, but if you're listening to the show and you're curious, this would be the one I'd tell you to check out from this episode.
Critics agree it's fine.
Christopher Lee, yeah, it's if you're a Christopher Lee fan, this is something I would tell you to check out. All right, now moving on. Before we go to the next movie, let's hit up what was going on in TV land during this week.
Get ready for fun.
I christen thee the Flying Wasp.
It's the Snobs versus the Slobs. He's inane.
I didn't do that.
He's insane. He's a snob.
How'd you like to mow my lawn?
And he's a slob.
Tell a cook this is low-grade dog food, all right?
Dog food!
And they're turning this country club into a nut house.
Hey, my buddy!
It's the clash of the classes, and the rules are off when these clowns compete on surf and turf to be the most sophisticated.
Let's pretend we're real human beings.
Freeze, go first!
To be the most fashionable.
Well, you buy a hat like this, I'll let you get a free bowl of soup.
And the most gracious.
Oh, it looks good on you, though.
The qualities that can turn a respectable country club into a Caddyshack.
You'll never be a member here.
Do you think I'd join this crummy snobatorium?
Chevy Chase, Ted Knight, Bill Murray, and Rodney
The
Dangerfield.
last time I saw a mouth like that, I had a hook.
In Caddyshack, next.
The top 10 for the Nielsen ratings for the week going from Monday through Sunday. So ending on the Sunday where the box office ends. The top watched program of that week was the TV premiere of Caddyshack on CBS. That's what Americans tuned into. Watch Bill Murray and Chevy Chase and all the Rodney Dangerfield. But that wouldn't happen now. Nobody's gonna. They're like, I just watched that on net. Like, no one's gonna watch. CBS tried to bring this thing back during the pandemic, I don't know if the ratings went good beyond like the initial weekend, but
not to my knowledge. Yeah, I mean, up until maybe 20 years ago, network premieres of big theatrical movies were a big deal.
Yeah,
because
like
there was
James Bond movies. That's how I watched plenty of them. Yeah,
I mean, there was a contingent of television viewers who, either didn't see the film when it was, generally speaking, a film would come out in theaters. 6 months later, it would be on video. Although we're getting ahead of ourselves because it's 1982, so even that wasn't really on the table.
No, yeah, it was barely. It was new. There was still a format war. It's coming. HBO's either right around this time or within the next year. But at this time, there's Betamax, VHS, and CED, and they're all not cost friendly to be in the family home. It's not until the late 80s that VHS becomes a prime source.
So when Caddyshack premieres on television in May of 1982, it's probably the first chance that people have had to see it since theaters. Ergo, it is something of a big deal.
Right.
And even, flash forward 10 years, in the 1990s, when you have other tiers of revenue, other tiers of exhibition, you have theaters. Then 6 months later, you get video. 6 months after that, about a year after theater, you get the premium debut, HBO, Showtime, what have you. And then between 2.5 and 3 years after theater, you get the network television premiere.
Right.
Which could sometimes be beaten to the punch by cable, maybe a year earlier. But at first, network and cable will get it about the same time, or network will get it first. And it would be a big deal. It'd be, tonight, the broadcast network premiere of Batman.
Yeah.
Before you see the sequel, come back how it all started. Boom, bum, 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 bum. And it would be, a big deal, relatively speaking.
Yeah.
And people that saw it in theaters and maybe even saw it on VHS and maybe watched it on HBO, they would still watch it on TV, even with commercials, even with edited for content and in full screen, because it was still, it was still a big deal. I mean, I cannot overestimate how different it was back when we were kids.
Yeah, no, it's way different. And like there you would tape it off TV and then you'd have your copy and stuff like that. And sometimes a VHS wait would be a year. That was how long it would take. And HBO, that people would tape it off HBO, you get HBO for that. And there was also a thing with the TV versions that there were scenes, because of cut for time and re-edits, you get deleted scenes in the movie because they didn't fill enough of the time to make it a 2-hour slot. So Halloween, notoriously known because they shot extra scenes for it. The movie Earthquake has a whole subplot that got added later. And King Kong, the 1970s one, has a completely extended version of that movie, and they would go reshoot things. They would add stuff. They'd re-edit. There's a lot of different versions, and they're fun to look at now because of what they did back then.
And for some movies, and this was a lot rarer for obvious reasons, they'd add a whole crap load of deleted scenes,
right,
and make a 3-hour cut they'd play over 2 nights.
Yeah,
with Superman the movie and Waterworld are the 2 obvious examples of that.
The Godfather got a whole
the Godfather
cut.
saga.
Yeah,
where they play the first 2 Godfather films in chronological order with some deleted scenes thrown in. And they would show that for almost an entire week.
Yeah,
those are long movies.
They are long movies. Yeah, you get it in 2 parts too. Some of them would be Friday night or it'd be Sunday night and Monday or Tuesday night, depending if the network was competing with Monday Night Football or not.
Yeah, and I first saw Halloween on network television.
Yeah,
and I was very confused when I rented the VHS a few years later. And wait a minute, there's a scene between the prologue and the sanitarium. I remember it. There's young Michael and Pleasance is monologuing, and I really liked it. What the hell is going on here?
Yeah, it's crazy. And then I didn't know about that until later on with the internet. And so I'd always watched it on VHS because I owned it. So I would go back and tape television recordings of it till I got someone who showed that cut.
Yeah.
And so I would have those scenes. But yeah, it's really the world of the TV movie and the network premiere of a theatrical movie were so different in this time. It's just fascinating. There's some good made for TV movies that would come out during this time as well.
There is a pretty comprehensive book on that I believe it's called "Are You Alone in the House?"
Yes, that came out been out maybe 5. Has it been out like 5 years ago? Yeah, something like that. I want to say like a couple years ago, but it could have been longer. Rounding out our top 10 here for the week, we have Dynasty came in at second place from ABC. TV censored bloopers from NBC. Now we just get gag reels on DVDs. Number 4, Too Close for Comfort on ABC. Three's Company, 5th place at ABC. The Facts of Life was number 6 on NBC. Number 7, Heart to Heart came in from ABC. Guess what? Number 8 is MASH on CBS. I don't know if it's a new one or a rerun. MASH would just dominate. At number 9, Inside the Third Reich Part 1, airing on ABC. And number 10, Battle of the Network Stars on ABC. That was the top 10 television programs for the week of the weekend of the 7th, the week that preceded our box office for that. Now moving on to our second movie of this triple bill we have for this weekend, Forbidden World.
Summoned to the Forbidden World, held in an icy grip of fear by a weird biological mutation. Part alien, part human, all nightmare.
Body. Reproducing.
This is an a-priority, high-security research facility. Actually, it's a scientist's dream.
What? Just stick with your charter, Colby. Just figure out a way to trap it.
You figure it out. I'm not going back in there.
Yeah.
Roger Corman film directed by Alan Holtzman, who would go on to win Emmys as editor of Spielberg's Survivors of the Holocaust. Man, I segued that Reich thing into that. There we go. It was one of the writers on it was Jim Wynorski, who would forever has awesome stuff because he did Deathstalker 2 and a lot of other like Chopping Mall, things like that. And RJ Robertson.
Chopping Mall
is so good. Collaborated with Wynorski a lot, starring June Chadwick, Jesse Vint, Dawn Dunlap, and Michael Bowen. This one is, so we're in the ripoff, don't remake. This is ripoff Alien, don't remake it, and sprinkle in some Star Wars. And this is your Corman cashing in. There are space battles from other movies of his, like Galaxy of Terror, Beyond the Stars. They're reusing sets. Someone who worked on the film said like the only thing that wasn't used from some previous production were the jumpsuits that Dawn Dunlap and June Chadwick wore. The Corman thing.
I kind of enjoyed this one, oddly enough.
It's not.
I
It's
mean,
all right. It's all right.
Watching it, again, very casually, not for any deep dive, whatever. It's $1 million picture. It was obviously very cheap bargain basement, but compared to most modern films, it looks so colorful.
Yeah.
It looks so lively and tangible.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean to, be, back in my day, blah, 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 blah. But there really is something missing from a lot of big studio movies today, to say nothing of the streaming stuff. That's a whole different conversation. When you watch something like this, that by all rights is Z grade, whatever, but it's alive.
Yeah.
And I actually enjoyed watching it. And I'm curious, have you seen the bigger budgeted 1990 remake?
A Forbidden World? No.
Because now I want to, because I almost enjoyed this one.
Yeah. This one's, it's all right. I watched this one actually twice during it because I didn't pay the closest attention the first time I did. And I was like, I need to watch it again.
You didn't miss anything.
No. I will say one thing. I think the difference we talk about, things are in the digital world of things are making things flatter and less colorful in what our films look like. It's just film is just lending. Digital is still on its way of getting there. That's the thing. But the colors just render better, and movies back then weren't afraid to be like sexual about things, and it makes it have a pulse a bit.
Yeah.
And this one is like, hey, we need some aliens, some hot girls that get naked, and some gory kills. Like that's the 1, 2, 3 that this movie's selling. And it's not ashamed of it. The only thing it's ashamed of is it's trying to hide that it doesn't have money. There's a lot of close-in shots.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of dark rooms. It's all very, by design, this should be a claustrophobic movie. It should be. And I thought the gore was really good for as cheap as this thing was. There's like a melted dead body thing, and there's all sorts of things and they cut around the monster good enough that it looked fine. It looked like Venom. Like Alien and Venom mixed together.
You do see a quote unquote final monster in this picture, and even though obviously they're hiding how little they had to work with, it's scary. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, that's effective.
Yeah.
I got, in a good way, it reminded me of, is the title From Beyond?
Yeah. The other
Stuart Gordon, not the Reanimator, but the other one.
Yeah, Stuart Gordon one with Ken Foray and the orange tidy whities.
Yes.
That movie. Yeah.
In that, it's as cheap as it is. I mean, the practical gore effects are effective. You get what you're paying for, even though you're probably not paying much.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it reminded me of in summer 2020 when we were all stuck at home and nothing was coming out.
Mm-hmm.
I got pretty tired pretty quickly of low budget, single location, haunted house VOD movies about trauma.
Right.
Some of which were good. And but I found myself very much yearning for something bigger. So I started tracking down a lot of bigger budgeted, outer space horror movies that I hadn't seen.
Gotcha.
Stuff like Life Force, stuff like
Life Force was awesome. I love that one. I love that. Oh,
that was $40 million back in the 80s. It's funny. My wife Wendy, she burned out on those so badly that she still refuses to watch Event Horizon.
Oh,
which is the one that I was sort of holding for the end because that was the good one.
Well, at least you got Life Force. The practical and matte painting work on like something like Light Force, like a uniform, like that's my kind of space, I guess. You go do your digital stuff, but that stuff haunts me, like looking at a matte painting more than anything digital does. But
but no, and I try not to be boohoo digital, blah blah blah. But if it's done well, it's done well.
Yeah.
But it's part of it is just the simple fact that when you're watching something from the 1980s, they had to make, almost generally speaking, they had to make it up as they went along.
Right.
It is obviously a skill set to make that stuff on a computer, but it was made in a computer.
Right.
And you don't know if what you're seeing is real and tangible. in a way that you do when you're watching something from a bygone era.
Yeah.
It's not fair.
Right.
But so yeah, when I watch something like Forbidden, I forgot the title of this movie. Forbidden World?
Forbidden World.
I'm going to say Forbidden Zone. That's something else.
And Forbidden Planet is also.
Yes, also. Forbidden Daycare was fun. I enjoyed that one.
That was a good one.
Yeah. But yeah, it works on its own very respective level. And knowing what I was getting into, I was actually kind of impressed by how much value I got out of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a bad little Corman cheapie. There's much worse. There's much worse.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. Corman is a blind spot for me.
Okay.
Are most of them this quote unquote good? Or did I just happen to pick a one that would actually look like they actually made its $1 billion budget go somewhere?
Well, if you watch too many of them close, you're going to recognize stuff. You're going to recognize like sets. You're going to recognize like scenes. You're going to recognize like special effects. Like, so space them out. Battle Beyond the Stars isn't bad. It's like Seven Samurai in space. It's actually one of his, that's the picture that kind of launched him into keeping knockoff things. I think Star Crash is a riot with Carolyn Monroe. That was his Star Wars attempt.
Yeah.
Some of their Sword and Sandals ones are okay, but those reuse a lot of footage too. But his stuff is always tangible, and I think the effects at least aren't afraid to be what they are. That's whether they succeed or not, whether it's a monster costume or someone getting bludgeoned or something like that. They're not afraid to be honest and go for it. That's kind of a thing. But yeah, this is a better one, and it also has some like June Chadwick. She was in things. She was in like V and things like that. Michael Bowen. So pretty decently handled one. But yeah, like Corman, I don't think all his stuff's bad. And the thing I love about what Corman did, and he brought us like Joe Dante, people like that, is he's the real test. And this is why I have a affinity for like slasher movies of the 80s and stuff, is because these filmmakers are put to the test you're given no money, not enough to probably make this thing, and you're not getting any more. What are you going to do with it? And you find out who's really good at what they do and who knows how to improvise the best, who knows how to make the best, the worst. I mean, you get Coppola from Corman. Yeah. You get all these like people, and Cameron, I think James Cameron did stuff for Corman too. Like these people know how to turn and I think honestly, James Wan, Lee Wanell are the modern day. They would have worked great with Corman because the thing I love best about those two, they can make $3 look like $100 million picture. And there are $150 million pictures that don't look like they cost that and don't play as well as their little $5 million movies. Like,
I mean, the Invisible Man looks amazing for what they spent on that.
They didn't spend anything. Malignant probably wasn't expensive.
3 times. Well, that was $40 million, but it looks it.
Yeah.
But Invisible Man looks like it cost triple what it did.
Right. And that's what I love about those guys. Like they can make, you'll get every bit of the dollar you spent on it. Like that's what I like about it. But Forbidden Planet. If you're looking for something schlocky, something gory, something
Forbidden World.
Forbidden World. The other one I'm sending you to Leslie. You were like, is that Leslie? This looks older than 1982.
Of the top 10 on Billboard's pop, soul, country, and album charts for the week ending May 2nd, 1982. Now, here's Casey Kasem.
Thank you, Charlie. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to America's Top 10. Let's turn right to the action on the Billboard Pop Singles chart and check out the 10 biggest hits this week.
All right. So we're going to move, before we move on to our last film, let's talk about Casey Kasem's weekly top 40, but only the 10. I'm not going through all 40 of them. So this week on the top 10, number 10 was Did It in a Minute by Hall & Oates. Coming in, it was previous week was number 11. I've Never Been Me by Charlene. Number 8, 65 Love Affair by Paul Davis. Number 7, We Got the Beat from the Go-Go's. Number 6, 8675309 Jenny, or that's / Jenny, by Tommy Two Tone. Number 5, Freeze Frame by the Jay Giles Band. Number 4, Don't Talk to Strangers by Rick Springfield. So yes, he had more than Jesse's Girl, folks. Number 3, I Love Rock and Roll by Joan Jett and the Blackhearts was the previous week's number 1. It got bumped down 2 spots. Number 2, Ebony and Ivory by Paul McCartney with Stevie Wonder, and the number 1 song for this weekend, ending week ending the 8th or the 9th. Scott, do you have a guess? Do you know what it is?
Had Thriller come out yet?
I don't think so.
Then,
That's going to suck if it comes out in the summer and that's like every week number 1.
Oh, yeah. I have to look that up when it actually debuted.
Oh, so number 1, do you have a guess?
I don't.
It is Chariots of Fire Titles by Vangelis.
That is amazing.
I can't. What I mean, I remember like what Duel of the Fates top pretty high on the billboards, but
did it?
Huh?
I mean, I you say so. I have no idea. I wasn't aware of any instrumental score pieces that did that well. I mean, obviously there's songs from the movie, all of them in the 80s and 90s.
But the score, a segment of the score, like I imagine that being a thing back in like the 40s or something like that.
Yeah,
but,
that's
like,
shocking. Even a piece of score like that single-handedly propelled the film to Best Picture.
But I think
I like the movie, but it's the music that makes that film remotely memorable.
But they don't like usually sell those as singles. That's the weird thing. So I think that's just
weird.
Something like, Vangelis would do Blade Runner, which comes out later this summer too. So that's a really interesting number 1. And what didn't get number 1 this weekend, the big new release for May 7th, 1982. It's Paradise.
A boy, a girl, a man obsessed, a battle, a death, a wilderness, rivers, sands, desert streams, fear, rage, survive, and dream. The birth of love, a newfound life, man, woman, paradise. Rated R. Starts Friday, May 7th at a theater near you.
Which is directed and written by Stuart Gilliard, the director of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, Rocket Man, and a ton of CW shows. And stars Phoebe Cates, William Ames, and a monkey. Sorry.
Any which way you can.
Yes, that's her. Not hopefully not in this movie. Hopefully not in this movie. This is the Blue Lagoon knockoff for this week. This is the ripoff Island of Blue Lagoon with Phoebe Cates in her first movie. Don't worry, folks. She'll make up for this with Fast Times at Ridgemont High later at the end of this summer. And Ames, he does Zapped later on in the summer too. But this is her debut. She was 17 filming this. So that must be the age of consent for boobs and butt on film in 1982. Or
I'm not Googling that.
Or were they going off of when it comes out, she'll be 18?
Perhaps.
Yeah. Cates was notably unhappy with this film and refused to promote or have anything to do with it. Was upset by the amount of nudity added after she had approved the cut of the film. And a lot of it, there was reshot with body doubles too. So be careful which Phoebe Cates scene you're checking her out for, because it might not be her. And it landed a Worst Actor nomination for William Ames, who was double nominated for this in Zapped, which he lost to Laurence Olivier. And
Laurence Olivier and what?
Inchon.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah, that's what he won for those Razzie Awards, which I don't typically care about, but someone might enjoy that factoid. The title track for this one was the number 2 best-selling single in Italy for 1982, which was sung by Phoebe Cates. So, yeah, this movie.
When people talk about stuff that wouldn't be able to get made today,
Yep.
usually they're full of crap. This absolutely would not be able to get made today.
Right.
For two reasons. A, the glorified near statutory rape subplots, which you have a very lustful and nudity-filled relationship between two teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
B, the entire plot involves two wholesome white teenagers whose parents get horribly murdered by swarthy Arabs who want to sell her, at least, into sexual slavery, and her hunky white, not quite boyfriend has to protect her through the course of the movie.
Who happens to look just like the Blue Lagoon kid.
Yeah. Which, it's yeah.
And this movie, like this guy, the guy that wants to put her into like sex trafficking, basically old school sex trafficking, like he just will not give up. Like that's the plot of this movie. Is this guy just, I must have this woman to sell to men? Like he can't get over it.
Doesn't he want to keep her for himself?
Oh, I don't know. I just thought he was like wanting to sell.
I think there's a line where he wants to keep. That's why he keeps going after her.
Oh,
because there is a line where it's like, you won't make any less money from one missing girl. Like something effective. I want her for myself. It's like,
gotcha.
I get it.
Yeah.
But yeah, not a good film.
No.
I mean, aside from the quote unquote problematic areas, it's just not a good picture.
Yeah.
It reminded me of another film that I'm not crazy about, Walt Disney's A Far Off Place, which came out in 1993, which has far less sex and nudity, I assure you.
It's all animated, but no, I'm kidding.
It's about a brother and sister whose parents are murdered by poachers, and they have to flee basically by themselves across the desert. And no, they're not brother and sister. Their parents are friends because they do have a very chaste romance along the way.
Okay.
It was one of those films that I saw at a young age when I was 13, when I was just starting to realize the difference between, a good movie and a bad movie.
Right.
That makes sense. And there were other films that I had seen before then that, I was 11. I was old enough to know that Hook was disappointing and Secret of the Ooze was lousy.
Gotcha.
But, it's so anyway, yeah, this reminded me of a bad film that I didn't like that I saw was 13. And it's exactly what you think it is from the synopsis.
Yeah, it's Blue Lagoon in the desert.
Yeah.
And not a well-filmed desert. And
no, it's again, I don't want to be a prude, but there's nothing else to recommend it except for the quote unquote offensive material.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I was the 80s guy, like as a boy, like Phoebe Cates was a crush because Gremlins, and you're like, oh my gosh. And yeah, like if like your desire is Phoebe Cates, just go see Fast Times. That's this movie, like, and it's just a bunch of just nonsense. It's boring. Like there's nothing compelling here. There's the action sequences are just rounding up and running and scurrying and killing people. There's no interesting set pieces. The nudity is just like, okay. You don't feel like watching it. Like the leads have no chemistry. And the guy is like, just, it goes from her being hunted by this older man to try to keep as a toy to having this teen guy just pressuring her for sex. And she doesn't buy into it until he gets bit by a scorpion and almost dies. And she's like, all right, we can have sex now.
Yeah, he's kind of a jerk.
Yeah.
Understandably. I mean, he's alone. They're probably going to die. And, it's sort of a, if not now, then when type situation.
Right.
But it's still not particularly, enjoyable.
Yeah. One thing I want to put, like, what was the fascination with this kind of story? Because there's the Blue Lagoon, and like Blue Lagoon was a phenomenon, and there's more knockoffs than this one that would come out. And
I think, I mean, I don't want to get canceled on our first episode, but I think more people wanted to see that kind of story with that kind of actress than they would otherwise be willing to admit to themselves. Gotcha. And I think those kinds of movies gave a safe outlet for that kind of fantasy.
Gotcha.
And to a certain extent, and I say this with much less judgment, there are women and girls that have, damsel in distress type fantasies. It's a Harlequin romance novel to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And that's obviously I have less issue with that because whatever, that's a harmless fantasy.
Granted, things are different back in '82. Like we don't have the internet for people to go search for things. That's a thing. I'm lucky enough to have been, born on this year and grown up to be introduced to Brooke Shields as a actor on like TV shows and stuff, and not this like this thing that was
child prostitute.
Yeah, that was obsessed over like unhealthily back then. As I found, like I never had to live through that and have that kind of like that icky thing back then, like because it was dealt with as like fine back then, right? It was just like, oh, is that Brooke Shields? And it's like
yes and no. I mean, it's and again, since I was like younger than her at that time, I certainly didn't feel guilty about looking sideways at the Levi's ads.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it certainly was something that the lust that dare not speak its name.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of was forbidden young love.
And obviously it's the same thing with pop stars. The last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
They very we're allowed to secretly shush admit that we want to bone Britney Spears, but as soon as she starts exerting her own sexuality, then that's too much and she's taboo.
Right. The Olsen twins of the 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you want to ask why people were interested in that. It's the reason you think people are interested in that.
Right. This is a perfect capsule of like something that went on in the area that people don't want to remember. That's kind of gone forgotten, but it was there. Because I remember because going to the video store back in the day is like, you see a wall of history when you go through the catalog section. And I remember you would see these kind of movies, like all like two young couples, like holding hands on the beach, laying together on the beach, doing something, it's like, I
mean, even something like, Drew Barrymore's Poison Ivy films.
Right.
You thought she was adorable in E.T., but now
you've been waiting for this moment.
I'm trying to think how I could say this without getting, yes, now she's hot. That's a G-rated way of saying that. And I remember something very insightful that Daniel Radcliffe said in an interview, a while back. Somebody had asked him if it felt weird when he had reached an age where people were noticing that he was a handsome and attractive young man. Mm-hmm. And he basically said it was like, when Emma Watson turned like whatever, you guys didn't pause 10 seconds before turning her into a lust object.
Right.
Heavily paraphrased, but you get the idea.
Right, yeah.
And my thing about that has always been like, look, lust after what you lust after, but just don't use an excuse to treat people like crap. That's but anyway, bad movie, not worth seeing even for the thirst factor.
Yep. It's never made it to Blu-ray or DVD, and somebody probably doesn't want it ever to. So you can find it if you look for it, but yeah, just don't waste your time. And it's not in good quality either, so don't waste your time. Don't waste your time. No way. So now we'll go to before we head on out. We're
if you want the scenes with nudity, they're at 0. No, I'm kidding.
All right, now we'll move on. Let's see how the box office did. Did any of these three films make a dent in the box office? So I'll move over to Scott for the 1982 May 7th through 9th box office report.
Yes. The top film, speaking of teenage horniness, the top film for the weekend in its 8th week of release was Porky's, 20th Century Fox's R-rated young boys on the prowl smash hit, directed by Bob Clark, who indirectly inspired a lot of modern pop culture without getting much credit for it.
Right.
Between Porky's, A Christmas Story, and Black Christmas.
Right.
That film made $3.39 million, dropping just 21% from its 7th weekend for a end of 8 weekend total of $72 million. It would eventually end with approximately 105 million domestic. I don't have the inflation adjusted on right here because Box Office Mojo doesn't make that easy for you anymore. Excuse me, I'm hiccuping. I apologize.
Oh, good.
And then, the second place movie is Paradise, which opened with $2.8 million. It went on to make $5.58 million. It was not a hit. And then you have, even by 1980 standards, it's not a hit. It was distributed by a company named Embassy Pictures, which does not exist. I bring this up because if you look at the top 10, the rest of the companies, 20th Century Fox, Columbia, MGM, Paramount, Universal, Warner Brothers, they do exist in some form or another. Still.
Okay.
Let's see. And then you had The Sword and the Sorcerer, which had 9.6 million after 17 days, after a $2.6 million third weekend gross. Chariots of Fire in fourth place with 1.75 million, going up 5% after 33 weekends in theaters. The film would eventually win Best Picture. I think it had already won Best Picture at the 1982 Academy Awards for the best film of 1981, beating out such films as Raiders of the Lost Ark and Warren Beatty's Reds. I love Raiders as much as everybody, but I would have voted for Reds.
Yeah, Reds is good. I just revisited
the Oscar to and other than that, it's basically a bunch of films that barely cracked $1 million. On Golden Pond is in 8th place with 1.1 million after 23 weeks in theaters. That Henry Fonda and Jane Fonda father-daughter melodrama would make $119 million in domestic grosses, which is spitball about $450 million domestic in inflation-adjusted grosses.
I'll tell you, here's an indictment on Paradise, the one we talked about. I'd rather watch On Golden Pond again than Paradise.
That's it. That's a good movie.
I'm not a fan.
Fair enough. It's better than Paradise.
It is better than Paradise.
Yeah, and Quest for Fire, one of many Tarzan movies that nobody actually saw. Tarzan's one of those characters that gets to be remade because it's in public domain, but with very few exceptions, nobody ever shows up.
Gotcha. There's was it number 9 was Death Trap. That's a popular movie with Michael
that the Chris Lee, Michael Caine one?
Was Christopher Reeve, Michael Caine one? Yeah, that's
I like that film.
But yeah,
and in 11th place was Richard Pryor's Live on the Sunset Strip, which was that the one after he set himself on fire, or was that the one after? Because I know he did one special afterward. I should have looked this up, and I apologize.
Well, I think isn't Live on the Sunset Strip? He's like holding his foot, like he's stepping on fire. Possibly. Is that the poster for it?
Yeah, I think so. Anyway, for those who don't know, Richard Pryor had a drug problem for part of his life, and he was freebasing cocaine, and he set himself on fire. It was a very serious accident. Obviously, he survived, and it made a hell of a comedy special when he eventually started talking about it. And that's pretty much, there's no other weird trivia really in the top 10 this weekend.
Yeah.
There'll be more next week.
Yeah. It just goes, it'll start filtering out with these movies that are getting released.
Because the calm before the storm usually has very little to offer in terms of big movies, because no one wants to open right before the first huge mega summer movie.
Right. There's usually like a big spring movie or two, and that's about all she wrote back then. And there's one little factor that we didn't really touch on yet that I'll touch on right now in case we don't mention it further, but re-releases were a big thing, because this summer you're going to see a re-release of Raiders, you're going to see a re-release of Star Wars, and I think there's like a Disney cartoon that gets re-released this summer. But those are a big factor, and those would place in the box office top 10 when they come out. Raiders obviously getting re-released because the next year would be Temple of Doom would be in 2 years, but probably going into production at the time to throw on there, and you can always add a couple more bucks on it because home video wasn't that big back then.
Yeah, I mean, up until I think the first price to buy cassette was Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan for $40 in 1982,
right?
/1983. I don't know when it actually came out. But I'm sure we will talk about that film eventually.
Oh, we might talk about that one
in June.
Yes.
Spoiler: it broke the opening weekend. It broke the opening weekend record.
Oh,
the movie that it beat, Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which broke the opening weekend record in 1979.
There we go. That's some spoilers of what's to come. Hey everybody, Brandon here. Before we head to the sign out portion of the episode, I wanted to let you know I finally did it. Started a Patreon page for the show. So you can check that out. It's at patreon.com/Brandon Peters Show. I felt the summer of 82 at 40 was good a time as any to start this up, build some excitement. I appreciate anything you do for it, even if you don't. It's up there just to have. I've been asked by people in the past. This isn't a, people are saying thing. It's people have asked me. They want to support me. I've always felt kind of weird and uncomfortable about it, but now's the time to do it. Summer of 82 at 40 has been an experience. It's been a great experience, but one where I'm like, you know what? I should start a Patreon for this. There's no tiers to it. It's whatever you feel. Donate. I'm grateful. I will set goals. Goals are fun, right? First one is up. It's $20 goal. So if I can hit $20 per month, Scott and I are going to do an epilogue episode of the summer of 82 at 40, where we talk about Porky's and the Sword and the Sorcerer. Two movies were like, one I haven't seen in a long time, one I hadn't seen, and they are going to be mentioned quite a bit down the road here because they stay in the box office top 10 for a bit, which surprises both of us, but we'll cover them. So patreon.com/the Brandon Peters Show, not the Brandon Peters Show. It's up. You don't have to donate. Don't feel guilty if you don't. The show is always going to be free to you to listen to. I'm never going to keep episodes from anybody or have exclusive ones. That's not my game. I want everyone to hear my show. If I record stuff, I'm not a big deal. I don't want to keep things from people, restrict or exclusive things. I want people to hear it. If I put the work in, I want it out there. So thank you in advance. Patreon.com/Brandon Peters Show. I hope you're enjoying Summer 82. Back to me and Scott from the past. And we're going to take things out and prep you for next week. Thanks. That wraps us up for this weekend of May. Scott, thank you for joining me. Before we head out, let people know where they can keep up with you.
Forbes.com, the ticket booth. Just Google basically Forbes.com, the ticket booth, Scott Mendelson. I'm on Twitter at Scott Mendelson, and that's basically it.
And that's where you can get the current box office, not this retro stuff that we got going on here. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Brandon4KUHD. Scott and I will be back next week, which sees Susan George haunted by a ghost in Tokyo, Sean Connery trying out some comedic chops, and a landmark fantasy film that launches a bodybuilder into movie stardom. That and more as we continue on the second weekend of the summer of 1982. Until then, stay film positive.
Thank you for listening. The Brandon Peters Show is a Creative Zombie Studios production. Produced by Brad Shoemaker and Brandon Peters. Written and edited by Brandon Peters. Announcer vocals by Jessica Alsman. Theme song by Metavari. Web design and show art by Brad Shoemaker with Brandon Peters. All music and clips featured in the episode are property of their respective studios, and no infringement is intended. The Summer of 82 at 40 and News of the Moment themes by Press Maxon. Additional information on this and other episodes at thebrandonpetershow.com. For any inquiries, press opportunities, or sponsorship, contact mail at thebrandonpetershow.com. The show is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere podcasts are found.